Okay, I have a couple of talking points that I can get into tonight. Um, I know this is a bit strange. I've been packing boxes and moving some things into a storage locker to prepare for the photographer to come, which did happen this morning. So the photographer came and took pictures of the house for the real estate listing. And so that much has been done, which is very exciting, and we'll see how that works out. But I'm not sure if it was doing that or what exactly, but very sore up in my shoulders and my neck. And so I have some BioFreeze on and the second dose for the night, and the towel keeps the heat in. So I hope you can forgive that and let it not be too big a distraction. I might need my glasses, so just a second here to read my own writing. Okay. So I was doing some more listening to A Course in Miracles and some notes that I took during the process, okay. This is from A Course in Miracles, and it's section 6, Conflict in the Ego. Now, and then I will go on from there. I don't know if I'll remember to cite exactly where it is in A Course in Miracles, but it pertains greatly to some of the things that have been coming up for me lately in my questioning, and also that I'm seeing going on in the world. So, and again, I just did a talk on truth and on, the discussion of fighting for truth and standing up for truth. And so this goes along with that, because the big question then becomes, well, what is truth, right? And in the last video that I did post, I spoke about truth being that which is above and beyond form, okay? And so this is going to just delve into that a little bit deeper. And I'm sure more eloquently than I have. So this note says perception began at the moment of separation. And that is important because I'll cite the beginning again in this way. So in other videos, I have said it in a sense that in order to know ourselves, we had to be able to see ourselves as separate from God, because in the sense of light, if you have this immensely big, brilliant light and you try to hold a candle up in front of it, you can't see the candle, because the immense bright light and you being the candle kind of blend together. So a fraction of that immense light and the light itself cannot be perceived as separate entities, because they are the same, okay? So when I have spoken at other times about this veil of forgetfulness, it cites it in this way: perception began at the moment of separation. Okay, and why is that? Because that is the moment when we chose to be able to see ourselves as something separate, because we are not ever separate from source, from our source, creator. It is a perception of separateness. It is a perception of individuality. Okay. Consciousness was, and this is a quote, consciousness was the first split that man introduced into himself. He became a perceiver rather than a creator in the true sense. In that moment, he realized himself as something separate or outside of God. Okay. Wait 1 second, I'll try to quiet the bird. Okay, we'll try again. So this was necessary for the experience, again, that we are having now, right? The veil of forgetfulness, the perception of being something separate from source. Now, this is a huge, huge concept that if we wrap our brain around that concept alone, much truth can come into the awareness of the mind. Why is that? Because here's the thing. If the mind is powerful enough to be convinced that we are separate, to perceive ourselves as separate from God, the mind then is not only no, I don't want to say easily manipulated, but if we were able to convince ourselves that we were separate from God, imagine the amount of untruths that we are capable of believing. Okay? Anyway, on with this. There, as it seems, would be varying, turn the page, degrees of consciousness / perception. And here's another quote. Consciousness is correctly identified as the domain of the ego, end quote. It must be so that in order to see myself separate from God as an individual having this experience, I must have created a fracture or a rift in the frequency, a shift in frequency from that level of God or oneness in order to seem individual. And then I noted in parentheses, individual, if you break that word down, it's in divide you all. That's interesting, isn't it? In divide you all. So we all, right? We are the all, but we are seemingly in divide, separate from. Okay. Accurate perception. I put in quotation marks, and then I asked the question, what is accurate perception? Right? Okay. And then I made this response to that question. Sitting in stillness as the true self, removed all self-interest, seeing without bias, seeing clearly with no investment in the vision nor the outcome. So what is accurate perception? Accurate perception is, and again, perception is of the mind. There's some other things here. Let me see if I can find it. Okay, let's get into this and then maybe I'll come back to it. Oh, here it is. The mind is on the level of God because the mind is very active because it has willpower. Okay, and that's not exactly a quote. When it willed the separation, it willed to perceive. Until then, it willed only to know. That's interesting, right? So, before the separation, was the mind. So, the mind is at the level of God because it had the will to choose to perceive instead of to know, which means it existed before. Okay, so then that means consciousness falls. Sorry about that. That was my foot on the rung of the chair. So consciousness falls then below or even removed slightly from the mind. It's interesting because I have books that I have read pieces out of that speak of mind being everything. Okay, and that's interesting because lots and lots of things that I've read cite that we, all of creation, are a thought in the mind of God. And that's interesting, right? So So the mind, being this all-powerful entity capable of even unimaginable things, made a choice, willed to perceive instead of to know, because before the fall, let's say, and that's what we'll call that, the moment of will to perceive is the fall. It is to go from the state of all knowing, knowing everything in truth, totality of truth, from the position of pure love, that is where God is, that we willed to perceive rather than to know. And that created the potentiality for experience, because you must experience that which is not you in order to have an experience that is different than all that you know, right? Or to come to knowing what you know through the level of experience. Now, I will go on further with this. This right-mindedness is a label used a lot in A Course in Miracles. And it says, God and his Son are of one mind. Okay. The superconscious, okay, this is a quote. The superconscious is the level of the mind which wills this. Okay. So superconscious is above the conscious mind. I haven't gotten too far into the levels, and it does speak of levels. I'll speak about the superconscious more because I have another note here. The superconscious is incapable of darkness. That's the superconscious. Is incapable of darkness and became almost inaccessible to the mind and entirely inaccessible to the body. So the superconscious then becomes the level above form, or maybe the true self, we could say. The Christed self, the spirited self, or spirit, would be then the superconscious. The conscious mind would be the mind after having willed to perceive rather than to know. Okay, so the conscious is the aspect of us having the form experience in form. Okay, the experience in form. That would be consciousness. And the level above consciousness, the level of spirit, then is super conscious. Okay. Let's see. Okay, now this goes on to speak of the next section, section 7, which is the loss of certainty. The ability to perceive is inherently judgmental. No one has been sure of anything since. Okay, so since the fall, again, the fall being cited in this way as the moment of willing to perceive rather than willing to know. That is the fall, okay? The fall into darkness, the fall away from absolute truth. Now, I do want to put a caution in here, a caveat, that it is never really gone. It is never really away. It is never really anywhere else. Only in the mind is it. So only as it is perceived. It never really goes anywhere. Okay. So no one has been sure of anything since. And this is why when people are very passionate about that which they believe is true, I have that caution, which is whose truth? You know, because even as I sit here making this video, I do not know how many things that are in my understanding. And that's okay. So someone else someone else had mentioned this word understand means under me you stand. And so, and what does that mean? Understand. It means, do you see as you are instructed? Do you see as I have instructed you? I say that to children a lot when I'm working with the children at daycare. I say, do you understand? And what I'm saying is, do you see as I have instructed? Or will you comply with the instructions I have given? All right. So, moving on. Then there is this quote. I'm sorry, not a quote. There is this concept or idea. To know yourself is to know God. And that may be a quote because, I've heard those things a lot. Okay. There. Oh, wow. I used the wrong form of there when I was taking that note. There is no separation between what we truly are and what God is. Let's see what the next note is. Okay. And these are just notes I took while going over these sections. Having been created in the likeness of God by God, if we truly know ourselves, we must also know God. In truth, we are one. And Jesus even said that. Jesus said, if you have seen me, you have seen the Father also. And that was a way that was left in the scripture, which pointed to us that when you know yourself, your true self, you must also know the one who created you, because you are an identical piece like that on that true level. That is the true level, the superconscious level. Okay. This is a quote. Judgment always imprisons because it separates segments of reality according to the highly unstable scales of desire. Okay. Then the next note I made is perception is inherently judgmental. So then my note after that, the bringing these pieces together. Truth is beyond perception, beyond judgment. It is what is after all desire is set aside. So absolute truth is when, and even clarity of perception, to perceive or to be right-minded, clear perception or right-mindedness is when we can set aside, dismiss, turn away from all of our self-interest, all of the desire we have about whatever that thing is, whether it be a situation, whether it be a conversation, whether it be a whatever. If we can set aside all self-interest or desire surrounding that, then absolute truth can be seen, can be communicated, can be received on the level of consciousness. Because it is an act to will to set aside all of desire to see truth is a superconscious act. So that is something on the level of superconsciousness that will bring in that higher level of understanding and awareness. I should not use the word understanding. But maybe that's okay in this sense too, because superconsciousness, spirit, we do want to align with. So we do want to align with those instructions. So that might be maybe the healthiest use of the word understand. Because to understand that of spirit or superconsciousness, superconscious or Christ consciousness, okay, and there's the difference. That's a good point. You have consciousness. All things have consciousness. But then we have Christ consciousness, as we term it. Christ consciousness would then be what this is citing as superconscious. That level of spirit consciousness, that level of higher level order of absolutes in a place of love. Without the human desires, without the interests of perception. There's all kinds of interests of perception. There is the one desire to be right, the desire to be, as I heard someone say, the desire to be heard, the desire to be recognized, the desire to be seen as intelligent, or to believe oneself as intelligent, all these things. That's all desire, and it's all part of perception. So when we set those things aside, then we are using a higher level order of sight. So those were just some things I wanted to touch on for today. Because I have been having, it's funny, so much talk about what is true. I've heard a lot of people saying that this month of October is going to have some pretty influential, or some pretty, for some, monumental shifts. And it could be a little difficult for some. It could, set some chasing further into the world of form, and for some they will be broken out of it because of, like hitting rock bottom in some ways of saying. I've heard people citing that, all of the things, so as I would put it in spiritual terms, the idols, right? Your idols are falling. These false gods will be taken from you, kind of things. And when I hear them speaking about the month of October, that's the way it translates for me on that level. I don't know that I don't feel it necessarily, but that's what I hear them saying. And these are human beings I'm talking about. Again, I don't know that I'm, I would like to believe that is true, because I would like to see some monumental shifts and changes. I would like to see that. But we have to just see how it goes, and try not to get attached to anything too strongly, because if that be the case, the things that we are most attached to, that we have made so very important in our lives, will be taken from us, that we can find truth beyond the form. And that's important going forward for, those of us who have not yet mastered that, right? Of which I am one, for sure. So, hopefully we can all get through this month, and with grace and ease, and adjusting to whatever shifts might come down the pipe. So I hope this message finds you well. I hope it gives you something to think about. In peace and love, may you be blessed.